Good morning, Motorheads. Today, we're going to get back on the Dana 60 project, and we're going to talk about making some tooling up that I need to carve the 35 splines into an axle shaft. Okay, Motorheads, so we're going to talk about the next phase of the journey of my Dana 60 front build. I intend to spline my own 35 spline axle shaft for the long side. You'll recall I cut the long side down roughly 4 inches. So we'll talk about these items here on the mill table and what the plan is, and a past failure. So this is a super spacer. This is the thing I'll actually use to cut the slots. And the reason I'm going to use the super spacer is because it's got this great big hole in the middle, roughly a 2-inch hole. Takes a 1-inch axle shaft, no problem. So the super spacer does what we call simple indexing. So there's the 24 tooth plate that came with it originally, and basically there's this little dog here that engages, and then there's also a brake lever right here on the side, and the brake lever stops it from spinning. So you engage the dog, you hit the brake lever. This is called direct indexing, and obviously any error on the plate is going to show up in the splines. So we're going to put that aside for now until we're actually ready to start making splines, and we're going to talk about how we're going to make a 35 spline index plate. So over here we have a couple of plates. This is the 30 spline that I made many years ago. It's pretty good. It's pretty accurate. Well, it's really good and really accurate, actually. I spent a lot of time measuring and verifying. If it looks like it was maybe made from an old brake drum or brake rotor, yeah, it actually was. This is part of a Jeep XJ Cherokee brake rotor. I made that with a rotary table. I have this Palmgren rotary table, and it didn't have this index plate on it. So I basically had to know how many degrees, minutes, and seconds and use the vernier readout on the table. It was pretty tedious and a little nerve-wracking, but it worked good. So some years later, I acquired this large Cincinnati index head, which is an interesting piece in that the spindle actually can tilt any way from down to the table on this side over to down to the table on the other side. And it's got this indexing plate. This is exactly what it's made for. But I had a couple errors when I was making another plate. So here's the 35 spline plate I attempted to make. And you can see the tooth that's marked is really thick. What happened when I was indexing and I didn't catch it to the end is that these sectors move pretty easily. And as I was indexing, I dragged on the sectors, and bad things happened there. So this plate's junk. So I'm going to make some new plates. I'm out of the XJ brake rotors. So what I've got is these 6-inch aluminum discs, a 1/2 inch thick, and I'm going to be using those. And what I'm going to do to prevent any error on the sector plate is literally just clip it down. That it's pretty rigid against me bumping it. We'll give a little demo later on how that sector plate's actually used. And then I just wanted to show you, this is a Dana 44 shaft here that I splined, Lord knows how many years ago, close to 20 years ago. I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. So I've been doing this before. I just don't have the 35 spline index plate I need to do the Dana 60 shafts. And this is a Dana 60, just for comparison. It's short side. Obviously, I'm going to be cutting down the long side. So there's the intro. Start showing you the machine work as we progress through making this index plate up. Okay, what we got here is a 2 3/4 inch hole saw. Might be some metric size, but it's about roughly 2 3/4. You can see I've already center drilled the plate. I do need a 3.5 inch hole on there for the indexer, and I do have a regular normal hole saw that's 2 3/4, 3 inch, and 3.5. Well, I don't know. I've never tried this carbide one before. Hopefully it works closer to how an annular cutter works and less like a normal hole saw. Hopefully it runs more true. We're going to give it a try and see. So we'll set you up on the tripod, show you what happens. Ooh, a little chattery. Let's slow that down. Give her some WD too. You probably can't see that, but my drill chuck is slowly rotating. So I'm going to kind of lock that in a little bit. All right, let's see how that does. All right, so what's happening here is that the gullets in the teeth on the hole saw, like this top one, are packing up. So I'm basically going to have to peck drill it for the last little bit, but I am almost through. There we go. Well, I'm going to say that was much better than your normal sheet metal style hole saw for this job. So I'll clean that slug out of there, and next step is we'll bore that out to 3.5. All right, taking a look at this, I'm not going to be able to bore it to 3.5 in the setup. You can see the jaws are maybe going to let me go to a maximum of 3 inches there. So I think I'm going to switch this out to the 4 jaw and do it a little differently here. Hey, Motorheads, here's where we're at with the setup. I'm indicating, as you can see, this is an as extruded piece, so the surface texture is kind of rough. I do have a couple jaw marks on it, but I'm indicating off the outer diameter right now, and we're within, a few thou. So I'm going to call that good enough. We might come back and make a cleanup cut later, but basically, I want to start with the outer diameter to keep the cleanup low. Don't really care where the middle is yet because we got a bunch of boring to do on that. So I'm going to take this little Starrett seesaw adapter, I'd call it, off the indicator and show you where we're at on this outboard face. So I did start by dialing it in axially, and hopefully it stayed fairly close. Same few thousandths, and that's a bandsaw cut on that. So, that's not bad. That's really not bad at all. So I'm going to do a really light face on this just to clean it up. It is locked down tight on all 4 jaws, so I'm going to do a really light face, and then I'm going to bore it to 3.5 inches so that it sits real nicely on the spindle on the super spacer. Alright, I'm going to put a new quarter on that before we proceed. Alright, here's something some of you might not have seen before. This caliper looks a little funny. It's because it's a left-handed caliper. So purposely sought this out, and works great for measuring inside diameter of holes, at least roughly, as close as you can with the caliper. So we're at 2.8, so that means we got roughly 700 thousandths to go. So I'm gonna just rock on and take out one full rev of my dial here at a few passes. That'll be 400 thousandths on the diameter, and we'll just go and bore it till we get there. When we get close, we'll slow down the feed so we get a better finish, so we can get a more accurate measurement. Alright, I think that's it. Yep, that's it. All right, so when we get to the, we recording? Okay, so when we get to the mill, I need some space to set this down. So I'm going to mill in, or I'm going to machine in a step about an 1/8 inch deep and about an inch in radially. Okay, I'm back at the mill, and let's talk about this setup a little bit. So I have a 3/8 2 fluid end mill in there, and you can see I have a little bit of clearance, but you can see why I machined in that step. I wasn't obviously going to be able to machine all the way down to the jaws without hitting the jaws. So we're still 3/8 wide. That's plenty wide for our purposes here. So back around on the back side is the brake, and I have the brake set up to lightly drag at all times, and then it's just a little flick to lock it. So you do have to lock the brake after every time you index. Then out here we have the sector arms, and I believe I mentioned this earlier, but my big mistake last time was bumping the sector arms. And lastly, we're set up on the 28 tooth 28 hole pattern. So that's it. When we index, we're going to turn this thing clockwise. No, we're going to turn this thing. Yes, we're going to turn this thing clockwise so that we're always going to feed into the cutter so that there's no backlash. And then the last thing is, if I go past, I can't just back up to the hole, because you could, let me do that again. If I go past, I can't just back up to the hole, because look at how much play there is in that worm gear. So I've got to go back so far that I turn it, which is like 3/4 of a turn, and then come up and drop into the hole. Oh yeah, and one other thing, safety precaution, I believe I mentioned, I am going to hold those sector arms with this spring clamp every time, just to make it a lot more difficult for me to bump them. So I'll set you up and we'll start doing some cuts. Okay, we're set up at 2160 on this mill. It actually calls for like 2100 for 3/8 end mill and aluminum, high-speed steel end mill. The chip load's supposed to be very light, and then my target depth is going to be 400 thousandths, which I've got that all set up on the DRO. So I don't know how much of this I'm going to film because it's going to be flinging a lot of chips, probably right at the camera, probably no matter where I put the camera. It's going to be a pile of chips by the time I'm done. But here goes. That's low range. Okay, well, success on the indexing this time. I'm not going to kid you. I gave this indexer a little extra love off camera. I kept finding other things wrong with it. So this plate, I was actually able to move it. It kept moving around, and finally I realized this is what locks the plate. There's some little teeth right there. First time using this indexer, and I guess I didn't read the manual that closely. So once I got that straightened out and got the brakes set right, got the sector arms, did the dual clamp, and was just very, very careful. everything came out right. So I've already deburred the part and ran around and measured it, and it's every tooth is 159 thousandths plus or minus 1 thou. That's going to be more than good enough because remember, this is on a 6-inch diameter. The shaft's on an inch and a half, so that amount of error you get to divide it by 4. So 2/3 is all the error that we're going to see there on the indexing. I don't know what that works out to in degrees, minutes, and seconds, but anyways, it all came out good. Here's the mountain of chips, a little bit on the floor, nothing too bad. And the next step is to lay the 3-bolt pattern with the countersink into it so that I can bolt it up to the super spacer. All right, well, last op on this thing is to lay in the bolt circle pattern, which is countersunk. It's a 1/2 inch on the big diameter. Small clearance diameter is like 5/16, but I'll just use my 3/8 end mill. That'll be fine. Instead of trying to use the indexer, because the indexer is going to be really complicated, to do a 3-bolt pattern, it's like 13 turns plus 8 holes, I believe, on some other 20, I think the 24 pin. Anyways, I'll lose count. So what I decided to do is just use the bolt calculator on littlemachineshop.com and XY out where I want the holes. So I guess I'll set you up, and we'll do a countersink and a through hole at each of these locations, and that'll be the end of this. Okay. All right, hopefully the shot works out, and hopefully you're not hearing too much noise from the rotary phase converter. I'm going to run around and do the countersinks first, and then I'll run back and do the 3/8. One thing you'll notice about my mill, it's a little different than Bridgeport's and the like. You can see it, is that I have not only do I have a knee, but I also have a graduated feed here on the quill. Wow. Stop that a little bit. Well, there you go, motorheads. I'm wrapping up this video. I finally got this index plate made. You can see it over my shoulder in the spacer. I'm happy with this one. I think it's going to be more than accurate enough for what I'm doing. Not going to say this wasn't without its pitfalls. I had two spoiled parts. One was a mistake I made, and the other was due to just me not being very familiar with that Cincinnati index head and its idiosyncrasies. So I think I've taught myself several lessons on that index head, and I've tried to show you those through the video. Don't be afraid to use one, but geez, if it's your first time, maybe have some spare stock around. I did spend a week waiting for this aluminum to show up to make this index plate, and it's a good thing I bought two pieces because I spoiled the first one. But anyways, got some more upcoming videos. The next job is to blank out that existing long side axle shaft on the lathe. I imagine that might be a video unto itself. We'll see. And then after that, I have to cut the splines. And we'll probably go into a little more detail on the super spacer when we're actually cutting the splines. But I'm not expecting any troubles from that because I've used it so much making 30 spline shafts. 35 spline shafts should just be 5 more splines, right? Anyways, thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.